The tribunal's decision echoed through the crystalline halls of the Nexus Concordat, each word carved in judicial finality. Admiral Freya Nigel stood at attention in the defendant's dock, her navy blue uniform crisp despite 6 months of confinement. The species assembled before her, Zephyrians with their gossamer wings, the silicon-based Kortak with their geometric faces, the telepathic Mindari whose thoughts hummed like distant music, all stared with the same mixture of fear and disgust. By unanimous decree of the Nexus Concordat, intoned High Arbiter Zal Keth, his crystalline voice fracturing light across the chamber. Humanity is hereby classified as a threat-level Omega species. All human settlements beyond the Sol system are to be evacuated immediately. A quarantine perimeter of 50 light-years will be established around your home system. Violation of this boundary will be considered an act of war. Freya's jaw tightened. Around her, the diplomatic gallery buzzed with alien voices. Some satisfied, others uncertain. The Terran delegation sat in stunned silence. Ambassador Chen's face had gone pale, his hands trembling as he gripped the armrests of his chair. The High Arbiter continued, his form shifting between translucent and opaque as emotion affected his crystalline structure. The evidence presented to this tribunal, the Kepler incident, the Titan mining conflicts, the unauthorized weapons development, all point to a species fundamentally incompatible with galactic civilization. Humanity's propensity for violence, their territorial aggression, and their disturbing ability to weaponize any technology they encounter makes them a threat to the stability of the Nexus. Freya stepped forward, her voice cutting through the chamber's acoustics. High Arbiter, if I may— You may not, Zal Keth interrupted. This tribunal has heard enough from humanity. Your species has been weighed and found wanting. The quarantine begins immediately. The gavel fell with a sound like breaking glass. 48 hours later, Omega Station. Asteroid Belt. The emergency session convened in the deepest section of Omega Station, buried within the heart of a hollowed-out asteroid. The chamber was Spartanly functional, gunmetal walls lined with tactical displays, a circular table of brushed steel, and no windows to the outside. This was where the Terran Defense Council made its hardest decisions. Admiral Freya Nigel sat at the head of the table, her uniform now bearing the insignia of Supreme Fleet Commander, a promotion that had come with humanity's exile. Around her sat the military and political leaders who would shape humanity's response to the Concordat's ultimatum. General Marcus Stone, scarred from the Martian liberation, leaned forward. Freya, we've got 72 hours before the quarantine fields activate. Every human settlement beyond Sol needs to be evacuated or— He didn't finish the sentence. They all knew what happened to those who remained outside during a Concordat quarantine. Defense Minister Sarah Webb, her dark skin bearing the stress lines of someone who'd spent months fighting a losing diplomatic battle, spoke up. We could comply. Pull everyone back to Sol, except the quarantine. It's not ideal, but it's survival. Survival as prisoners, growled Admiral Kane Reyes, Freya's former rival, and now her most trusted military advisor. They're caging us like animals because they're afraid of what we might become. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the civilian scientist who'd somehow earned a seat at this table, adjusted her wire-rimmed glasses. They're not entirely wrong to be afraid. The technological gap between us and them has been closing rapidly. Our adaptive capabilities, our innovation rate, it's unprecedented in galactic history. Freya studied the holographic display floating above the table. Red zones marked human settlements throughout the galaxy. Mining colonies, research stations, trading posts, all of them would be abandoned or destroyed within hours. What about Project Prometheus? The room fell silent. Project Prometheus was humanity's deepest secret, a weapons development program that had been running for 15 years in facilities hidden throughout the Outer Rim. The Concordat suspected its existence, but had never found proof. General Stone nodded slowly. The Tartarus facility is operational. We've successfully tested the gravitic pulse weapons, the quantum destabilizers, and the temporal displacement fields. The Nemesis-class dreadnoughts are ready for deployment. Numbers? Freya asked. 12 fully operational warships, each one capable of taking on a Concordat battle group. The technology is significant. We've essentially militarized theoretical physics. Minister Webb looked uncomfortable. If we use those weapons, we prove their point. We become the monsters they say we are. We already are monsters to them, Admiral Reyes said quietly. The question is whether we're going to be monsters in a cage, or monsters that bite back. Freya stood, her hands clasped behind her back. The Concordat has made their choice. They've decided that humanity is too dangerous to coexist with galactic civilization. They want to quarantine us, to contain us, to make us disappear. She turned to face the assembled leaders. They're about to learn that they're absolutely right. The vote was unanimous. 72 hours later, Proxima Centauri system. The Concordat fleet arrived with overwhelming force. 200 warships of various designs filled the space around Proxima Centauri, their energy shields shimmering like soap bubbles against the cosmic darkness. The quarantine enforcement fleet was a display of the Nexus Concordat's might. Zephyrian carriers with their gossamer winged fighters, Korthak dreadnoughts bristling with geometric weapon arrays, Mindari vessels that moved with unnatural precision, guided by their telepathic crews. Fleet Admiral Zeph Kayla of the Zephyrian Navy stood on the bridge of the flagship Harmony's Edge, his translucent wings folded against his back. The human settlement on Proxima B had been evacuated, but protocol demanded a full sweep of the system to ensure no hidden installations remained. "Begin the resonance scan," he ordered, his voice carrying the musical quality of his species. "I want every asteroid, every gas cloud, every particle of dust examined. Humans are remarkably good at hiding things." The scan commenced, waves of exotic energy probing every corner of the system. The readings came back clean. No significant technological signatures, no hidden bases, no evidence of the rumored human weapons programs. "System is clear, Admiral," reported his tactical officer, a Korthak whose geometric face showed satisfaction. "No signs of weapons development or hidden installations." Zeph Kayla nodded. "Excellent. Signal the fleet to establish quarantine positions. We'll maintain a presence here for—" The tactical display exploded into alarms. Gravitational anomalies spiked across the system as space itself seemed to twist. The Mindari crew members on the bridge screamed in unison, their telepathic senses overwhelmed by something vast and alien. "What's happening?" Zeph Kayla demanded. His answer came in the form of emergence. From the heart of Proxima Centauri itself, something vast began to rise. The star's corona flickered as massive objects displaced stellar matter, climbing out of the nuclear furnace like leviathans surfacing from an ocean of fire. The first ship to emerge was a kilometer long, its hull gleaming with exotic metals that shouldn't have been able to exist in a star's core. It was followed by another, then another, until 12 massive vessels hung in space, shedding plasma like fiery shrouds. The Nemesis-class dreadnoughts had awakened. Admiral Zeph Kayla's wings spread wide in shock. "Impossible. Nothing can survive inside a star's core. The temperature, the pressure. Apparently humans can," his tactical officer said, his geometric face cycling through rapid color changes, a sign of extreme stress in his species. "Admiral, those ships, they're not like anything in our databases. The energy signatures are completely unknown." On the bridge of the lead dreadnought, Retribution, Fleet Admiral Freya Nigel stood before a view screen that showed the Concordat fleet in perfect tactical detail. The ship's interior was a masterpiece of human engineering. Surfaces that flowed like liquid metal, corridors that seemed to bend space around them, and weapon systems that hummed with barely contained energy. "Report," she commanded. Commander Lisa Park, her tactical officer, stood at a console that responded to thought as much as touch. 200 Concordat vessels, standard battle formation. They're maintaining quarantine distance but appear to be scanning for additional installations. "Let them scan," Freya said. "They won't find anything else because everything they need to find is right here. All stations, prepare for engagement. Remember, we're not just fighting for territory, we're fighting for the right to exist." The ship's AI, a quantum consciousness called Athena, spoke with a voice like wind through crystal. "Admiral, the Concordat fleet is attempting to establish communication. They're broadcasting surrender demands." Freya smiled grimly. "Respond with our own message. Tell them that humanity thanks them for their concern about our dangerous nature. Tell them they were right to be afraid." The transmission went out across all frequencies, Freya's voice carrying to every ship in the Concordat fleet. "This is Admiral Freya Nigel of the Terran Defense Fleet. You came here to enforce a quarantine, to cage humanity because you deemed us too dangerous for galactic civilization. We want you to know that your assessment was completely accurate. We are too dangerous. We are the species that builds weapons from stellar cores and turns stars into hiding places. We are the species that makes war into an art form and death into a precision instrument. You wanted to see why humanity frightens you. Allow us to provide a demonstration." The first shot came from the Retribution's primary weapon, a gravitic pulse cannon that didn't fire projectiles, but instead fired compressed space-time itself. The beam struck the Concordat flagship, and for a moment nothing seemed to happen. Then the ship began to fold in on itself, its hull compressing as local gravity increased by a factor of 10,000. The crew had perhaps 3 seconds to understand what was happening before their bodies were crushed to the density of neutron star material. The demonstration had begun. The Battle of Proxima Centauri. Admiral Zeph Kalar watched his flagship die and felt something alien to his peaceful species: rage. The Zephyrians had been a warlike people once, millennia ago, but they had evolved beyond such base instincts. Now those ancient genetic memories stirred as he watched his crew die in the most horrific way possible. "All ships, attack formation," he commanded, his musical voice turned harsh with fury. "Concentrate fire on the lead vessel." The Concordat fleet opened fire with everything they had. Energy beams that could crack continents lanced through space, plasma torpedoes that burned at the temperature of young stars streaked toward the human dreadnoughts, and quantum disruptors that could unmake matter at the molecular level filled the void with deadly light. The human ships didn't dodge. They didn't even raise shields. Instead, they activated their temporal displacement fields. Time fractured around the Nemesis-class dreadnoughts. The incoming weapons fire slowed, then stopped, then began moving backward as localized temporal fields reversed causality itself. The energy beams returned to their source weapons, the plasma torpedoes flew back into their launch tubes, and the quantum disruptors unmade the ships that had fired them. Commander Park's voice was steady despite the impossible physics surrounding them. Temporal fields holding steady. The enemy's weapons are experiencing causality reversal. They're destroying themselves with their own fire. Freya nodded, her attention focused on the tactical display. The Concordat fleet was in chaos, their perfectly coordinated formations breaking apart as ships began firing on each other in confusion. The temporal fields were making it impossible for them to distinguish between past and future, between action and reaction. "Athena, bring us within optimal range of the Kortak dreadnoughts. I want to show them what happens when humans get creative with quantum mechanics." The Retribution moved forward, its hull shifting and flowing as the ship's morphic armor adapted to incoming fire. The Korthak vessels were geometric nightmares of sharp angles and impossible mathematics, their weapon systems based on principles that could drive organic minds to madness. Under normal circumstances, they would have been formidable opponents. These were not normal circumstances. The second human weapon was the quantum destabilizer, a device that didn't destroy targets so much as convince them that they had never existed. The beam struck the lead Korthak dreadnought, and reality hiccuped. The ship flickered, its geometric perfection wavering like a mirage, then simply ceased. Not destroyed, not vaporized. Simply edited out of existence, leaving behind a void in space that even light avoided. Admiral Zeph Kalar's remaining ships were in full retreat now, their crews panicking as they faced weapons that violated every law of physics they understood. But the humans weren't finished. The third demonstration was perhaps the most terrifying. The human dreadnoughts activated their gravitic anchors, devices that could manipulate gravity on a stellar scale. The fleeing Concordat ships found themselves dragged back toward the human fleet by tidal forces that turned their own acceleration against them. The faster they tried to flee, the stronger the gravitational pull became. "Sir," Commander Park reported, "we're detecting quantum communications from the Concordat fleet. They're broadcasting a general retreat order." "Too late for that," Freya said. "They came here to quarantine us. Now they're going to learn what happens when you try to cage a predator." Aboard the Concordat. Flagship. What remained of the Concordat fleet was trapped in a gravitational web that turned space itself into a prison. Admiral Zeph Kalar stood on the bridge of his damaged flagship, watching his remaining ships being systematically destroyed by weapons that shouldn't exist. His communication officer, a young Mindari whose telepathic abilities were being overwhelmed by the psychic screams of dying crews, looked up with wide, terrified eyes. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. They want to negotiate." Zeph Kalar's laugh was bitter. "Negotiate? After the slaughter? They're offering to let us go," the officer continued. "All of us, if we agree to deliver a message to the Concordat." The Admiral's wings drooped. He had lost over 100 ships and thousands of crew members to weapons that violated every understanding of physics. His proud fleet had been reduced to a handful of damaged vessels, trapped in a gravity well that no amount of technology could break. "Put them through," he said quietly. Freya Nigel's image appeared on the main screen, her uniform still immaculate despite the battle raging around her. Behind her, the bridge of the Retribution hummed with alien energies and impossible technologies. "Admiral," she said, her voice respectful but firm, "I'm prepared to offer you and your remaining ships safe passage out of this system. In exchange, you will carry a message to the Nexus Concordat." Zeph Kalar's hands trembled as he gripped the command rail. "What message?" "That humanity accepts the Concordat's assessment. We are too dangerous for galactic civilization. We are a species that builds weapons from the fundamental forces of the universe and turns the impossible into the inevitable. We are creatures of war and destruction and adaptation." Freya's expression hardened, "and we are no longer content to be caged." The transmission ended. Moments later, the gravitational web released its grip on the surviving Concordat ships. They were free to go, to carry their message of terror back to the Nexus Concordat. But as they fled, long-range sensors detected something that chilled them to their core. The 12 human dreadnoughts were not alone. Deep scans revealed hundreds of similar signatures throughout the system. Hidden in asteroid fields, cloaked in nebulae, orbiting within the coronas of stars. The humans hadn't just built a few secret weapons. They had built an entire secret fleet. 6 months later, Nexus Concordat, core worlds, The High Arbiter Zalketh stood in his private chambers, his crystalline form flickering with agitation as he reviewed the intelligence reports. The carefully constructed quarantine around the Sol system had failed. Human ships were appearing throughout the galaxy, not the crude vessels they had shown before, but sleek predators that moved through space like living things and struck without warning. A soft chime announced the arrival of his aide, a Mindari whose thoughts usually provided calm counsel. Today, those thoughts were chaotic with fear. "High Arbiter," the aide said, his mental voice trembling. "We have received another communication from the human fleet. They are offering terms." Zalketh's form solidified, his crystalline features hardening with resolve. "What terms?" "Complete withdrawal of all concordate forces from systems with human populations, recognition of human sovereignty over their settlements, and—" The aide paused, his mental voice barely a whisper. "Formal acknowledgement that humanity was right to resist the quarantine." The High Arbiter was silent for a long moment. Through his chamber's windows, he could see the lights of the Concordate's capital world, a place that had known peace for 10,000 years. Now, even here, the citizens lived in fear of the dark shapes that had been seen at the edge of their system. "And if we refuse?" he asked. The aide's mental voice carried images of destruction. Human weapons that could collapse stars, ships that could phase through matter, technologies that turned the laws of physics into suggestions. "They have demonstrated that their threat assessment was accurate, High Arbiter. They are too dangerous for galactic civilization." Zalketh nodded slowly. The quarantine had been meant to protect the galaxy from humanity's dangerous nature. Instead, it had forced humanity to embrace that nature completely. They had become the monsters the Concordate feared, and they had become those monsters by choice. "Send our response," he said quietly. "Tell them we accept their terms." As his aide departed, Zalketh remained standing at his window, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, in the darkness between worlds, humanity was spreading. They had been called too dangerous for civilization, and they had responded by proving that assessment absolutely correct. The galaxy would never be the same. 1 year later. Omega Station. Admiral Freya Nigel stood in the observation deck of Omega Station, watching the steady stream of human vessels moving through the asteroid belt. The quarantine was over, but humanity had not returned to its old ways. The galaxy had taught them a valuable lesson about the nature of power and the price of freedom. General Stone joined her at the viewing port, his scarred face showing satisfaction. "The Concordate has withdrawn from all disputed systems. They're even offering trade agreements now." Freya nodded, but her expression remained thoughtful. "They're afraid of us, Marcus. They should be." "Any regrets?" he asked. Freya considered the question as she watched a Nemesis-class dreadnought dock with the station, its hull still showing the impossible geometries that let it exist partially outside normal space. The ship was a testament to human ingenuity, human determination, and human ruthlessness. "They said we were too dangerous," she said finally. "They were right. We are dangerous. We're dangerous because we adapt, because we innovate, because we refuse to accept limitations. We're dangerous because when you back us into a corner, we don't just find a way out. We make sure the corner ceases to exist." She turned to face General Stone, her eyes hard with the wisdom of someone who had seen the true nature of power. "The Concordate wanted to cage us to protect their civilization. They've learned that some species can't be caged. They can only be respected." Outside the station, the human fleet continued its patrol of the galaxy, their ships moving like sharks through the cosmic dark. They had proven themselves too dangerous for galactic civilization, and in doing so, had forced that civilization to evolve. The galaxy had wanted to know what made humanity so dangerous. Now they knew, and they would never forget.